Hey YouTube, just another quick video about an issue I had with my wife's 2014 Ford Explorer. Around 40,000 miles, noticed some dark oil spots on the garage floor. So of course, went in there and inspected it and realized it was coming from the PTU unit. So of course, I consulted YouTube and found out that there's all kinds of problems plaguing the PTU unit on the Ford product line. So I went ahead and pulled the plug, found the oil level very low. So I went ahead and refilled it with, or actually overfilled it with gear oil to be on the safe side. And all was fine for quite a while until several thousand miles later, I noticed a faint humming sound slowly coming and thinking, oh boy, it must be the PTU is going. Probably as a result of not catching that oil leak soon enough. Well, changing the oil, motor oil that is, I noticed a bearing on the passenger side CVC joint was actually coming apart right where it attaches to the side of the motor. Usually this would be bad news, but because of the noise I was getting, I was hoping this may solve the problem of this humming, as a CVC joint is quite a bit less expensive than a PTU unit to replace. So I went ahead and removed the shaft, installed a new one, got the car up and running, and of course that noise was still there. Unfortunately, it was not the problem. So kept driving the car many thousand miles more, and the noise slowly got louder and louder, almost like a gear sound to be exact. It got to the point where it was getting so noisy, I believe it was around 60, 70,000. I pumped the oil out of the PTU. It was all black and disgusting, but still full from the previous fill. So I got to watching some videos on YouTube of some guys dissecting them and noticed how the idler gear, the thrust washer and bearing gets full of thick tar like grease, preventing it from getting lubricated. So I went out and purchased some lightweight shockproof, the red line oil, that's similar to motor oil in weight, thinking this has a better chance of getting in and around all those thin, areas in the bearings and the thrust washers, and hoping when the unit heats up, the oil won't turn to sludge like the regular gear oil does. And apparently the one upside is when it turns to sludge, it plugs that vent so the oil can no longer leak out and drip all over the floor, as I noted that when I refilled it the second time, when there was still plenty of oil in there. Now the truck is at 80,000 miles. Now my wife is complaining quite a bit how noisy it is when she's driving it at all speeds. The noise now starts at like 20 miles an hour where it used to be around 40. So I also noticed it sometimes sounds like a CVC joint, like a gear noise, and it sounds like it's coming from the rear of the vehicle. So at this point, a decision needs to be made. Whether do I pull the PTU unit, and after going up there and inspecting and looking over what all needs to be done to replace this unit, it's quite a lot of work and expensive at that. Or is it something in the rear, like the wheel bearing or the rear differential? So if you're watching this video, more than likely you are having some sort of issue as well. So my recommendation is, do yourself a solid, buy a stethoscope, they're very inexpensive, and get your vehicle off the ground, because the PTU unit will lock the front drive shafts to the rear drive shafts, and there's no spinning the wheels independently. In my case, I convinced myself the PTU unit was defective, and saving myself a trip out to my brother's using his lift, I opted to simply raise the front wheels off the ground, disconnect the drive shaft, and listen to the PTU unit with engine running that way. Unfortunately, the results of the traction control system not detecting the rear wheel spinning makes a very unfavorable situation with the drivetrain jerking on and off. It throws codes. Do not disconnect the drive shaft. It's not an effective way to check this unit out. At this point, everything is apart, and to reattach the drive shaft, the rear wheels had to be raised off the ground anyway. So with the rear wheels on jack stands, I had somebody spin the wheels, and I placed a stethoscope on the right wheel, and I could hear a steady roaring sound, which was good news to me because that meant possibly it could be a wheel bearing, because I compared it to the driver's side with a stethoscope, and that side was quiet. So I think I may have pinpointed the problem. With a sense of relief, now that it's just probably the wheel bearing and the car already lifted on jack stands and ready for service, ordered the bearing and was sitting on my doorstep before I could get back to the garage. Was ready to start this simple install as I've replaced many bearings in the past. So how could this one be much different? Well, let me tell you, this bearing is really a son of a gun to get out. Even my best friend here, the big sledgehammer, beating on it, no luck. Used a chisel, jammed that in between the bearing and the knuckle, trying to wedge it out, no luck. Then I got the idea of mounting this steel angle iron to the spindle and bolting it on and taking that big sledgehammer and bashing one side, figuring I'd be able to rock it out of there one way or another. And it is just stuck. It wouldn't move at all. Even ended up taking this heavy, solid steel rod and going behind the wheel bearing from under the car, putting it up against the bolt that bolts into the wheel bearing through the knuckle, and slamming it like a heavy, heavy slide hammer into those bolts, and nothing. It wouldn't even move. So back to YouTube, which I probably should have done from the start. Found out that some of these guys had to use hydraulic presses to get them out, which required the knuckle to be removed from the car, which is a lot more work. And found on YouTube also some guys that used a bolt to press them out while leaving the knuckle on the car, and they seem to be very effective. So that is the option I picked, seeing I had quite a few inventory of these kind of bolts. So fingers crossed, back to the car, cutting off the stud off the wheel. I removed only one stud because I didn't want this, in case this technique didn't work, I could still put the wheel on and drive it if I needed to. Whereas some guys use these bolts in two locations. I picked this half-inch grade 8, 2.5-inch long bolt. So like others performing this on YouTube, I was able to get the bearing started out of the knuckle using this large impact wrench. And then after it was out a little bit, I was able to switch to this smaller battery operated wrench. And as you can see, it worked really well. The only downside to using one bolt is you have to take it out and spin the wheel 180 degrees to the side and kind of go back and forth, whereas two bolts would have been much quicker. The big reveal after we pried this in there, hammer that in there. And this is the bad bearing. After removal and upon inspection, this is a good example of galvanic corrosion. After spending some time in the military working on aircraft, we learned that it's a no-no to put two dissimilar metals together for this very reason. Not sure why the Ford engineers designed a steel bearing to go into an aluminum knuckle. That's a poor decision. However, that's what they did, and we all have to live with it. When I first removed the bearing, I grabbed it and I was spinning it. It has a lot of resistance, like it's full of grease, like the new one had. And I was skeptical that it was bad. But once I put it in a vise here and you turn it fast, you can hear it. That's all it takes. Just that little noise, and it makes the whole car sound like it's falling apart. Or it almost sounds like the PTU was bad. That's what I thought. So in conclusion, if you're facing a similar situation, definitely invest in one of those stethoscopes and track down the noise. Just don't rely on YouTube and watching the videos of the PTUs exploding. I almost formed my decision on that, was ready to rip it out, and I'm so glad I did not, because it would have been a waste of time. Diagnosed with that stethoscope, and it really pinpoints the noise. And hopefully I help someone out there through my experience and save you a lot of time. Okay, same drive, new wheel bearing.